wrestling, volleyball, and slalom, all released in March of 1987. They were all sports titles, and that's pretty much where the similarities end. The order I tackle these in is largely arbitrary, so let's take a look at pro wrestling. The second. Actually, Nintendo got beat by two other games on this one. Pro Wrestling was the third wrestling game for the NES. A little overkill, isn't it? The two previous wrestling games, Tag Team Match Muscle by Bandai and Tag Team Wrestling by Data East, were not the best simulations to say the least. Bandai was one of the first third-party developers for the NES, but its three 1986 games, Chubby Cherub, Muscle, and Ninja Kid, had mixed to negative reviews by the public and critics alike. The same can be said about Data East's attempt at publishing quality third-party titles during this era. While the two wrestling games share very little in terms of gameplay, they do share one trait. They're bad. The biggest issue with the two games is their complexity. Wrestling is a weird sport, making it difficult to adapt into a video game. Rather than scale down the complexity to make it fit within the medium's constraints, Data East and Bandai left the formula of wrestling as is. This makes the games borderline unplayable without thoroughly studying the manual and memorizing each and every button combination. Nintendo's rendition of the game simplified the sport by allowing button mashing to achieve some surprisingly positive results. This isn't to say that the game is an inaccurate simulation of wrestling though. Far from it. Pro Wrestling features 6 characters, each with a unique look and set of moves. The names here are ridiculous but memorable. Fighter Hayabusa takes the place as main protagonist, shown first on the character select screen. It's likely that this Japanese fighter was based on Antonio Inoki, a professional wrestler turned politician who was incredibly popular at the time. He had access to the back brain kick as his special move and was an expert in judo, another nod to Inoki's proficiency in the martial arts. There were 2 American fighters, Giant Panther and King Slender, who embodied the American beauty standard of blonde hair and a big chin, and had mundane special moves like backbreaker and headbutt. Kin Korn Karn was from Korea and specialized in Mongolian chopping techniques, while Starman hailed from Mexico and had a luchador mask and fighting style featuring many flying attacks. Lastly was the Amazon, a half piranha, half man from an unknown location who had the ability to bite his opponent into submission. The game functioned on a stamina-based fighting system, but the stamina bars were hidden from view. The goal is to wear down your opponent to the point where they cannot mash hard enough to get out of a floor grab. Pro wrestling is best experienced with another person, meaning it's one of the very few black box games that were actually more fun with 2 players. Another notable example being Urban Champion. Unless your opponent chooses the Amazon and just chomps on your head for the entire match, that is. Anyways, in order to master pro wrestling, one would have to become intimately familiar with the many, many moves that exist. You can punch, body slam, climb onto the ropes, throw your opponent out of the ring, jump kick, and more, all with the judge keeping a close eye on tackles and time spent outside of the play area. The details, both in terms of gameplay and graphics, are significantly better than anything we've seen up until this point, maybe besides Super Mario Bros. Instead of a gameplay experience supplemented only by sound, pro wrestling has an intense bout of hype music that repeats throughout the entire match. The players are extraordinarily detailed without being too blown up in scale, and the title sequence features an introduction complete with musical number in stark contrast to the few bars of song and then radio silence of previous sports games. Nintendo's transition into 1987 is the first big leap forward that the company had made since Super Mario Bros.' release. The pressure was on for Nintendo to inject their first-party games with as much polish as possible. With the advent of competition, particularly in games such as Konami's 1986 game Gradius or Capcom's Commando, it was becoming clear that Nintendo would need to step up their game or be relegated to the role of console manufacturer and not game designer. Masato Masuda was allegedly the sole designer of pro wrestling, a programmer who would become the staple ingredient to a large number of wrestling games to follow, including Thunder Pro Wrestling Retsuden and Fire Pro Wrestler Combination Tag. It seems likely that Masuda created the game while working at TRY, a company that would turn into Human Entertainment and was contracted by Nintendo. But, as with all early data, it's difficult to actually confirm this. No matter where the game was produced, Nintendo certainly published it. Pro wrestling is a cult classic among longtime players of the NES, and on a personal note, was one of the very first black box games I played before conceptualizing this video series. My brother was playing as the Amazon, biting my head in-game, when I figured I had to play the rest of the black box set in order to understand how I had gotten to that point. He did end up beating me, but I don't want to dwell on it too much. Pro wrestling's impact can be felt within a lot of Nintendo's later fighting game titles and spin-offs. This is most notable in, and say it with me, Wii Sports. That's right, from the stamina system to the mashing when dropped, I feel that Nintendo went back to this title when looking for inspiration for their Wii Pack-In game. Professional wrestling has always been more of a niche interest than standard boxing, so by changing up the title and streamlining the gameplay to work with motion controls, Nintendo had themselves a wonderful callback to both their later 1987 release, Punch-Out!, and the classic Pro Wrestling. The combination of these two games culminated in the iconic scene of getting beaten senseless by Matt the Knee, something I'm sure none of us will soon forget. The winning screen of Pro Wrestling also turned into a meme in 2004, a wonderful mistranslation that has cemented itself in internet history. The game has only been officially re-released a single time with the advent of the Switch eShop in 2018, at least to my knowledge. Pro Wrestling may not be a game with much of a storied history in terms of gameplay, but the turning point that it showed was an important step in Nintendo's shedding of the black box set. It has been over a year and a half since the first series of games dropped on the NES, and by 1987 the console already took up a majority share of the US video game market. Nintendo was no longer contemplating how to sell the console to this new market, and was instead shifting their focus to creating actually solid titles. While 3 wrestling games within 6 months was certainly overkill, Pro Wrestling showed the public that Nintendo would remain on top no matter who they were up against. They would always have a chokehold on their own console's games.